this lesson, we're going to focus on Erikson's theory of psychosocial development and what that means over time. So when you hear the terms psychosocial development, what are we really talking about? Well, what I'm talking about is how we live in the world, how we deal with other people, how we view ourselves, and how we also look at our successes. And today we're really going to look at the 8 stages of development by Erikson. And what he really did was he expanded on Sigmund Freud's theories in psychosocial development. There's a lot of ground to cover, but one of the things that I want you to keep in mind is that a person has to master a task before they move on to the next stage that they're in. So it's really all about growth. So let's get started. As we move through these, you're going to start to notice a trend, and it means that there's a central goal for each stage, and that has a direct oppositional reaction if that goal is not met. So let's look at the first one kind of to get an idea. And the first one is trust versus mistrust. And it's really early on. So about birth to 1 year. And what happens is that infants look to the primary caregiver as a source of things like consistent, reliable, and predictable care. And if they look at this person and they're getting hurt or injured, or if there's a breakdown of any one of these, then it develops mistrust. And as they move out of this stage and into early childhood, so like 1 to 3 years, they're really going to focus this stage of autonomy versus shame and doubt. And what really happens at this stage is this child starts to develop skills and independence. And the other thing too is about this stage is that they should be allowed to test their capabilities. You should really challenge them. So parents should be encouraged to allow the child to take on a task until they fail or they ask for help. So that's something like putting on a jacket. As a result, if the adults tend to criticize the child or criticize the failure and they're not able to do that task, it can actually lead to shame, which is totally in opposition to autonomy and independence. As you move from early childhood into the late childhood, this is where we're going to start to look at something called initiative versus guilt. This is in the 3 to 6 year age range, and this is where the child begins to interact with others. They're going to start having more playtime with other kids, and a lot of times this is going to be initiated by themselves, and this is where they're going to start to become inquisitive. If adults become critical of that inquisitive nature, what ends up happening is they start to have this sense of guilt, which is really harmful to their initiative. The next phase that we go into is something called industry versus inferiority. And what Erikson meant by industry here is it's a sense of accomplishment. So in this stage, children need to really be encouraged for their successes or encouraged to succeed. And if they're not, it leads to this idea that if they don't succeed, they are actually failures, or that it leads to this sense that they could be seen as inferior as a lack of their success. After childhood, we move into this idea of adolescence and your early adult stage. For the stage of adolescence, which is this one, it's called identity versus role confusion. And the purpose of this one is it focuses on a sense of identity and purpose. This is also the stage that includes body image. So if for whatever reason in this stage, the patients don't feel like they have a sense of purpose, like thinking about what they want to be when they grow up, then this leads to problems with how maybe they view their role, either in their family or potentially within society. And as they start to get a little bit older and they start to seek out other relationships, you're going to run into this intimacy versus isolation. So this is your young adult stage. This is where you're going to get into the stage where your patients are going to run to seek out long-lasting, intimate relationships with others. If they don't, what happens is they start to feel this sense of isolation, or they start to feel isolated from society or within their whatever unit they're in. So maybe their family or maybe among their friends. So it's really important for them to seek these relationships. As we start getting into middle age and older age, this is the stage where you're going to get a lot of reflective processes happening. And for our middle-aged patients, you're going to run into this something called generativity versus stagnation. Generativity is Erikson's word for being productive. So what we're really focusing on is that the patients need to feel like they are contributing to society, or that they're being a productive member of society. Like all the other developmental stages, the opposition of productivity, we're looking at a sense of failure. So if a patient feels like they're not contributing, then they're going to feel like they maybe haven't been unsuccessful for that portion of their life. And then we finally get into this integrity. And this tends to segue into this last phase, which we call integrity versus despair. This is really going to be seen in your geriatric patients. And what they do is they spend a lot of time reflecting on their life and maybe their successes throughout their life, or just being reflective in general. And this is definitely that reflective time period, and they start to look back and they want to see what they accomplished in their life. If they didn't feel like they have any success or that they were productive, what happens is this tends to lead to maybe hopelessness or depression. So where do you fit in to all of this? Well, first off, these theories help you to understand your patient's development in their life, and as you go about planning their care, you can anticipate responses, you can predict patterns, and it also affords you the opportunity to educate your patients. So you wouldn't want to try to educate a 3-year-old on developing long-lasting, intimate relationships, because that's not the stage they're in. What they're focused on is learning about other people. They're learning how to reach out and get a little bit of independence, because that's what they're focused on when they're 3. So you also want to consider their goals for success. And when you're starting to do their plans of care, you want to start thinking about where they're at in their developmental stage, so that you can plan for them and set them up for success. And throughout this lesson, we really focused on these nursing concepts, on human development and cognition. We also work to focus on health promotion and setting the right goals for a patient. So let's recap. Erikson's psychosocial theories really focus on how we interact with the world over time and through our lifespan. Early childhood really focuses on building trust and independence for those kids, and late childhood works to focus on interacting with others, and also about short-term successes as they start to grow into young adults. And then when we're a young adult, we really want to focus on purpose and our roles within society, on also seeking out and building those long-term lasting relationships. And lastly, as we get into our middle age and old age, it's about reflecting and being aware of what productivity we had and what successes we had across our entire lives. That's it for this lesson. Make sure that you check out all the resources attached. Now go out and be your best selves today. And as always, happy nursing.